Welcome back to High School Backups. Clearly, this is not our normal setup. We are actually going to trying to expand our content for y'all. We're going to start doing individual videos like this where a couple of us, one of us, maybe three of us hop on, talk about a topic that we want to talk about. Today, we're going to be discussing the college football national championship landscape, the college football playoff, and four teams that traditionally haven't been in the playoff who might be pushing for a college football playoff spot. As a matter of fact, we might have an honorable mention fifth one, but let's get right into it. Austin, you already know we're not going to be discussing the Georgias, Ohio States, Alabamas, and Clemsons of the world today. We
No
already
need.
know they've dominated the college football playoff. We want to focus on teams like Tennessee, Michigan, Oregon, USC, and maybe even TCU, teams that haven't traditionally been in the college football playoff. And let's start with this new number two team in the country after they dominated a ranked team in Kentucky, the Tennessee Volunteers. Biggest thing with Tennessee is that offense, right? Hendon Hooker, 25 or 24 years old right now, going to be a 25-year-old rookie in the NFL next year. Went from virtually unknown to almost a top 10 lock in the NFL draft. I was listening to Colin Coward and Joel Klatt the other day, and they were talking about his meteoric rise. But when it comes to the Tennessee Volunteers, I think all of it runs through Hendon Hooker. That team is averaging over 50 points a game and over 500 yards a game right now, which is absolutely asinine. And they look like a
Beast.
complete football team after what they did to Kentucky. Any thoughts on Tennessee? Like,
I just think one, it's fun to see this story. Tennessee hasn't been that powerhouse of a blue chip program they were, over a decade ago.
I think
Really before Saban
the
came
last
in.
the last time we saw Tennessee as like a powerhouse was the Peyton Manning years, and that was like the late '90s,
Yeah, I was
mid to
gonna
late
say like late
'90s.
'90s, early 2000s. They were still kind of that big blue chip program that was the dominant force of the SEC, and yeah, so it's great to see them having a good year again. They're one of those storied franchises. Them, Notre Dame, some of those other ones that have just always been there, but they've struggled for the last 20 years as it's been at other teams in the SEC. So I'm excited to see them, and I do kind of hope they make it to the playoff because I would love to see some fresh blood in there.
No, that's absolutely true. I wouldn't call them a lock, but for the most part, I mean, the remaining schedule is they do have to play Georgia. But the great thing about Tennessee right now is they are undefeated. They've already beat Bama. I think they could afford a loss to Georgia if it's close and still make the playoff. They'd probably be the four seed at that point and have to play Georgia again. And let me quickly look up the way the SEC structures
Yeah,
its.
that's what I wanted to see because if they're on Georgia's side, that's going to be a tough one. Which I think they might be. I think they're on Georgia's side. Which, if that's the case, a loss would be detrimental.
Honestly, I don't think so. I'm not going to lie to you. See, the thing about it is, even if they don't have that SEC championship game, if they play Georgia and keep it close, say it's like 43-42, even if it's 49-45, something like that, if Tennessee keeps it close, I think they've earned that spot.
I think, I think what it comes down to is what happens to the rest of the SEC. So let's say Alabama goes the rest of the season undefeated, and Georgia beats Tennessee next week, and they're the ones on the same side of the bracket. That means Tennessee doesn't get to play in the SEC championship, but it would be another Alabama versus Georgia. And if Alabama does beat Georgia, now you have every single one being the other one, but Alabama has the tiebreaker because of or I should say Georgia has the tiebreaker because obviously Alabama's getting in as a one-loss SEC team with all the other ones being one loss and the championship, and then Georgia has the tiebreaker over Tennessee because it has the head-to-head.
I didn't think about this, but honestly, if that's the scenario that plays out, you can see three SEC teams in the college football playoff. I would hate my life if that was a
It
thing. I
would
would
be
hate it.
interesting. It would.
But like that is a realistic scenario where if Tennessee keeps it close against Georgia, wins out and then barely beats Georgia in the SEC title game. Who do you knock out? I
Right,
know
they all were so close to each other
because Tennessee beat Bama. Like
by 4.
who do you knock out?
Yeah, exactly. So now you have Bama with a loss to Tennessee, Tennessee with a loss to Georgia, and Georgia with a loss to them. They have this triangle going, and then it's like, okay, well, who's the other team that's getting in? Because I could easily see that as well. It all depends, because can you really give it an undefeated Clemson team, put them in? Could you put
Well,
without really strong schedule, especially if Ohio State or Michigan wins out and takes the Big Ten title.
I mean, well,
I
that's another team that we are going to talk about soon, Michigan. But we already know Michigan has to play Ohio State at least once.
Yep.
And so you're looking at one of those two teams being knocked out automatically. I think a one-loss SEC champion Bama gets put in above Clemson. And honestly, just by the eye test, Tennessee is better than Clemson. Like if they lose to Georgia, even if it's close, I don't think they get knocked out of that top four. I think you essentially get Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Tennessee. But then Tennessee goes on and beats Bama, or Bama goes on and beats Georgia in an SEC title game after Michigan or Ohio State is lost. You're essentially looking at that top four, and I'm going, I could put 3 SEC teams. Mind you, the SEC and the NCAA would eat it alive. I would hate it. But,
Yeah.
mind you,
I agree with you. I think there's a easy scenario like that where all of them take one loss and we see three SEC teams and whoever is the Big Ten champ.
oh, I would hate
Like
it.
that's the most likely scenario if that happened.
I hate that. I really hate that.
I do too.
That's a lot
Because
of ifs, but
yeah, there's no way that I don't think there's any way Clemson beats the Big Ten out, and there's a good chance that because the NCAA and rightfully so sees the SEC as a much better conference
well,
than even the Big Ten, they're gonna put 3 in. You put the Big Ten champ because it's the second best conference, and they're gonna whoever that is gonna be undefeated. And then you have a Clemson team who's undefeated, but looking on the outside in because they just don't have the strength of schedule, and they're not the Clemson of like 4 years ago. And then you have someone like an TCU or something like that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But what if they're undefeated? Unfortunately, guess what? You don't have a strength schedule and you don't have a Big 12 championship, so you're also on the outside looking in probably at that like Rose Bowl or something.
well, they have a Big 12 championship, but they don't have a game, so it's like the Big 12 has
Yeah,
put themselves at a significant disadvantage when it comes to. We're going to switch over to talk to about TCU because they put themselves at a significant disadvantage. Because the only way a Big 12 team really gets into the college football playoff is if it's a team like Oklahoma the last couple of years when they had Lincoln Riley, and they're dominant, and the conference is at least decent, and they have to run the table every year. Doesn't matter. Like, they have to run the table.
Yep.
And that's the bigger issue on my end with the Big 12 is they need to get some sort of conference championship game going so these teams that are actually really good have a conference title to their name, like a conference championship game, the extra 13th game for some reason this college football playoff committee puts a lot of emphasis on.
Yep.
And I would feel for TCU if the scenario that we were just talking about with 3 one-loss SEC teams comes to fruition because they wouldn't make it. It just wouldn't happen. They're not better than those 3 SEC teams. They're just not.
No.
Like, if Bama plays TCU today, I'm taking Bama. If Tennessee or Georgia plays them today, I'm taking either of those teams. So
it's probably a blowout, like it was for some of the Michigan or Oklahoma or last year with Cincinnati. Like they just couldn't quite compete.
No, honestly, I'd actually think the college football playoff is going to be more competitive this year. We've seen a lot of these divisional games get out of hand in recent years, so I'm really hoping for a more competitive college football playoff. But speaking of the Big Ten and, Michigan, let's turn it over to our friends, the Michigan Wolverines, who are an absolutely tough football team and probably the most, I would say, the best coached of the 4 teams that we want to talk about, and then TCU being brought up. So the 5 teams left, I think Jim Harbaugh is probably the best coach. Would you agree with that?
In the Big Ten, yeah. I mean, I still like Day. Ryan Day is still... He puts Ohio in the top 4 every year going into that Michigan game. And to be fair, Jim Harbaugh really only has one great year with Michigan last year.
So not in the Big Ten, but out of the schools like Michigan, Tennessee, Oregon, USC, and TCU, is Jim Harbaugh the best? Like, it comes down to Jim Harbaugh and Lincoln Riley there. Who's the better coach of the two?
Yeah, I think maybe I might swing Lincoln Riley just because he was consistent with Oklahoma, and he put a USC team, which that program has not been good for what?
A decade, since Pete Carroll
left,
really.
Basically. Yeah, really. They had a couple years where they flashed and looked like they were going to be back, and then everybody's like, oh, they're back, and then they wouldn't be back, and they'd choke at the end. So I really think that, him doing that, the Pac-12 all of a sudden looks like a much better conference again this year. Like, not like top, but it's finally looking strong again. I'm really liking this college football season. The last few seasons I haven't cared to watch that much because it's
Yeah,
basically been like the SEC and nobody else.
that's fair.
Besides like Ohio State, maybe Michigan last year. Luckily, a Cinderella team is Cincinnati, but um, having the Pac-12, having the Big Ten, having the Big 12, all of those, other conferences actually be able to compete in some way has been really nice to see. So yeah, I would say I'm with you that Jim Harbaugh is probably one or two with Lincoln Riley.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, when it comes to Lincoln Riley, so I remember Jim Harbaugh, obviously, like Stanford 49ers, Jim Harbaugh.
Yep.
I remember all of that and like remember watching all of that. So I kind of take that into account when I'm talking about his time at Michigan too. And I think the way that he operates is he takes time to build programs, whereas Lincoln Riley, especially coming from Oklahoma, had a few guys transfer, including Caleb Williams, who's been on fire the last few weeks.
Yep.
Where Jim Harbaugh, sorry, not John Harbaugh, the coach of the Baltimore Ravens, uh, had to kind of take it slower, build it up, do these things where he has built a program that is based on toughness. His teams always have great defenses. They can always run the football. The biggest question mark of all Michigan programs, including this year, is can they throw the ball? I mean,
Yep.
they run for more yards than they do pass for yards per game right now. They have average about 200 rush yards a game. And they only average about 177 pass yards per game. But the nuance to that is that honestly, with the program and with the style of play that they have, their quarterback just needs to complete passes at a high clip and keep the offense moving, and that's what JJ McCarthy has done. He completes passes at like 77%. It's nuts, like outrageously high. And so when it comes to Michigan, I'm kind of hopeful that they actually might be able to push with the Georgias of the world. I think they can push with the Tennessees of the world because of how good their defense is. And their offense is based on just grinding you out. If Michigan can keep it close, they're a team that's really dangerous. If they get behind a little bit and it's 17-3 in the second quarter, then they're not as dangerous. But, I mean, the biggest knock on Michigan, actually, is the fact that they haven't played anybody. Their schedule was 90th, strength of schedule wise. But I was looking at some advanced stats, something called simplified rating system that takes into account like how many points you score in the point differential of your strength of schedule, and they were still in like 13th, so not bad because they've blown out everybody they played.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
absolutely blown out.
I think let's talk quickly about the Big Ten. The only two teams that really have a shot at anything is Michigan and Ohio State.
Yeah.
They have to play each other before the Big Ten title. Who do you like out of that matchup? And who do you think's just the stronger team overall?
So that's a very, very good question. I want to give the nod to Ohio State, who have C.J. Stroud, who have all the, mind you, Marvin Harrison Jr. looks like the best wide receiver in the country right now too. But here's the thing again, what I said about Michigan is that they are tough and they play really good defense. So when it comes down to it, I think that game comes down to, do you get an Aiden Hutchinson like performance from last year where somebody gets 3 or 4 sacks, gets a lot of pressure on CJ Stroud, or does your defense look like it did 2 years ago where they couldn't touch him?
Right.
Where they couldn't touch Justin Fields, mind you. So I think that game really comes down to the nuance of, do they get pressure on C.J. Stroud? If they do, Michigan's better. Michigan's going to win. If they don't, C.J. Stroud's going to light them up. That's really what that game comes down to. And when it comes to the Big Ten, Ohio State and Michigan are in the same division.
Right.
So you could see another scenario we were talking about with Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. And whoever wins that game gets the blessing of playing Illinois or Purdue.
Yeah, it's
So last week of the year is actually the Big Ten championship game, unless Illinois or Purdue somehow come up and surprise us. But if I'm looking at it right now, after what Michigan did to Penn State, I'll probably take Michigan. But that really could come back to bite me in the butt. Like that prediction could come back to bite me in the butt.
Yeah, because Ohio State, their defense stepped up at the end of that Penn State game.
Yeah.
But they were looking a little shaky for first 3 quarters, really.
Well, the entire team was looking shaky for the first 3 quarters. The game was really close until about midway through the third. I think it was a 3-point game about midway to the third, and then Ohio State decided.
I remember that they were losing going into the fourth.
Were they?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what I think. Like I saw the notification from ESPN saying, "Hey, they're down going into the fourth," something like that, and they came back and
But
just
yeah,
run away with it.
it was close until about the fourth quarter, and then they blew the game
Yeah.
wide open. I mean, again, that's what I'm talking about when I talk about Ohio State's offensive prowess and guys like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jackson Smith and Jigba, and all of the weapons that they have on that Ohio State offense. This is an entire separate video that we could talk about why Ohio State quarterbacks don't work out in the NFL. But literally, it's because of the talent they have around them, where those 10-yard windows that you have to throw into when you play at Ohio State shrink to 1-yard windows. And
Yep.
so, see, this is why CJ Stroud's going to be a really tough evaluation for me come NFL draft time. I love CJ Stroud as a prospect. I really do. I think he's the complete quarterback. But how much do I have to value him throwing to all of these first round wide receivers? It's the same thing I had to do with Mac Jones and Tua Tagovailoa a couple years ago, and it's just absolutely nuts how many weapons they have.
Yep.
But when it comes to the Big Ten, definitely you have the two teams, Michigan and Ohio State. I would love to see Michigan in the college football playoff again. I think they put up a better performance than they did last year. Another outside team that we're actually going to move to two Pac-12 teams now. We're going to first talk about Oregon and the shift that we have seen from, the Chip Kelly era to where they took a little bit of a downturn and now they're back into the college football playoff contention. They actually just beat their old head coach who now coaches at UCLA. We want to talk about the Pac-12 revival. That's really where it starts. UCLA being good again is huge.
You know it is.
And USC being huge, being good again is absolutely crucial, actually.
Yeah, those three teams have to always be at the top.
Like, they have to be good. And
you could throw Washington in there.
Washington
has been that too, but yeah.
Washington normally is decent. Other Pac-12 teams, I mean, Oregon State being good is always helpful. No, excuse me. Hold on, something in my throat. But Oregon, let's talk. When it comes to Oregon, I mean, again, Bo Nix playing well has really helped them. How much emphasis should we put on that first game where they lost to Georgia 49-3 is the real question. Because everything after that has been perfect.
I think they played like a BYU team who they haven't been whatever, it's a BYU team. I think it's huge that they beat UCLA and they beat them by 15.
Yeah.
That's good for them. I need to see them do it against Utah, who's 12, and I need to see them do it against an Oregon State team also. If they do that, then I'll say, okay, maybe, that first game was a little, not necessarily a fluke. I think if they played now, I think it'd be more like maybe a 40, probably like, let's say 40 or just in the high 30s to like 27. Like, I think it'd be like a 10, 15 point game from over them. It wouldn't be a 46 point difference.
Yeah.
But I still think Georgia just blows them out. I don't think they're that close. I don't think that they've turned it around so much that it's like, oh, they have a shot at beating them. I wouldn't put them in the same breath at all. I think they're definitely second tier. I think we both would agree on that. But I think it'd be closer. I think it'd be a better game. I think they've learned and grown from that blowout.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, Bo Nix's only bad game of the year literally is that game against Georgia. Like, he's thrown 3 interceptions all year. 2 of them came against Georgia. He's been almost perfect since. And from what I can tell, Oregon did a different, or the Pac-12 did a different thing this year where, yes, they still have, like, divisions, but it's the two highest win percentage teams that are going to meet in the championship
Right, they're not
game.
doing the two sides.
So as long as USC wins out and so does Oregon, you could see a conference championship game against USC and Oregon. If Oregon wins out and then wins that Pac-12 title game, do you think they make the college football playoff, or is there just too many factors to think about that right
now? There's a lot of factors. It's kind of the same thing for TCU, and I'll probably talk about that again in a second. But I mean, USC and UCLA, whoever wins their matchup in 2 weeks is going to be obviously probably facing Oregon, because Oregon's probably going to win out. But they still have a couple tests left to go. Like I said, they have, who did they still have to
They
play?
have Washington, Utah, and Oregon State
right.
left.
That's what it was. So, Oregon State's ranked, and so is Utah. And Utah's right there kind of with them at 6-2. So that's another thing that kind of shows me what at least the playoff committee is thinking.
Yeah.
You've got Oregon, USC, and UCLA 8, 9, and 10, and then you have a 2-loss Utah team at 6-2, only one spot behind them.
Hmm.
So it kind of tells me that they're not too they're not super high on those three teams. They're like, okay, they're definitely top 10 teams, but they're not super high in the Pac-12. Or else they'd probably be ahead of some of the other people. But it's kind of hard to be higher than TCU, Alabama, or any other people ahead of them. So they're definitely at the top, second tier, maybe even pushing that first tier of teams. But let's say
And then
Oregon does win out,
doesn't
and
Oregon
then
State slip in here somewhere? Yeah, they do. The 2-loss Oregon State team is now at
yep,
24.
exactly. So I will say that because of how many ranked teams they have, even at 6-2, like Pac-12 is looking a lot better this year. So if Oregon, let's say Oregon or USC win out and win the Pac-12 championship, they're at 12. What? Yeah, they'd be 12-1, both of either one of them. And let's say, I think they still need Alabama to lose with like LSU or Auburn or forget who else they're playing. Ole Miss. They have to lose one of those games, be 12-2, or 10-2 going into. Well, they wouldn't even make the Pac-12. The SEC championship. I don't think. I'd have to look at the bracket and see what it turns out. They might be able to sneak in on the other side, but then they'd be playing either Tennessee or Georgia, whoever's undefeated going into that game.
Yeah.
And a 10-2 SEC championship, I just can't. I don't think you could put them in over even a one-loss Pac-12 championship. But I don't think they'd get in either. I think a Clemson team that's probably going to go undefeated would be in. I think Ohio State or Michigan's going to get in, and I think if Georgia beats Tennessee, or the other way around, whichever one loses that game, and Alabama is a 2-loss team going into the championship, and even if they did win, you're looking at 2 1-loss SEC teams, and probably Ohio State or Michigan and Clemson going in, and that's your college football playoff.
Honestly, if there's a 2-loss SEC champion in Bama, I don't think any SEC team makes the Final Four. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like,
really? So you think if Georgia, let's say Georgia beats Tennessee, so Tennessee has 1 loss, and then Georgia goes in and loses to Alabama, you think all 3 of them get knocked out?
So the problem there would be the fact that if Bama loses, so they have 2 losses going into that title game, no matter who it is, they're out of the top 10. Or maybe number 9, right? So how do you justify Georgia losing to a 2-loss team and staying in the college football playoff, and how do you justify putting Tennessee over them? Like, you could justify moving Georgia to 4 maybe, but like at that point, the SEC goes from having 3 prospective teams in the college football playoff to
I could
maybe
say
0.
Maybe Georgia at 4, but I agree with you. Yeah, I think Tennessee can't get in then, which sucks for them because even if it's a close game, it's like that sucks because they didn't get a chance, another shot at Alabama, or maybe they do beat them. And yeah, if Alabama is a 2-loss team, we all both agree you can't put them in. So you're looking at, like, if TCU does win out, and Oregon or USC, whichever one wins out, you're looking at maybe Georgia at 4, Ohio State or Michigan at they're probably number 1.
Yeah.
Whoever wins that, they're number 1 then if that happens. Clemson's probably 2, and then you're looking at either a TCU team. That would be interesting if this all happens that way. For the committee to have to decide, do you put TCU, who's undefeated, but they didn't have a championship game, or an Oregon or USC team who has 1 loss but also a Pac-12 championship? That would be interesting to see. And then do they put Georgia in?
Yeah.
Or do they put one of those 2 or both of those teams in? That'd be very interesting because Georgia has 1 loss, so they're the same as Oregon and USC, but they don't have the championship. But they have the stronger conference.
They passed the eye test. Like, Georgia is clearly just watching them the better of the 3 teams.
Right. So I would love to see what the
committee does.
Yeah, the committee does, because I think this is a scenario I want to see. I want to make them sweat. I love watching the committee have to sweat out this decision, because that's a very tough decision. I mean, everybody has a reason to be in at that point.
Honestly, I'm with you, and I think it would definitely show how much the eye test actually matters, because they claim it doesn't matter. Like, they claim that your credentials matter more than the eye test, which I don't think is true at that point. I absolutely think they put a Georgia team in there, even if all of that happens, even though they don't have the credentials to back it up. Like, they wouldn't have an SEC title. they'd have a blemish on their record. They wouldn't be undefeated, even though you'd have an undefeated conference champion in TCU probably being left out for a Pac-12 champion in Oregon or USC if they both went out.
Yep.
And obviously there's a lot of ifs here, but at that point you'd have Michigan at number 1 or whoever the Big Ten champion is at number 1, because I'm assuming it's Ohio State or Michigan. It's one of the two.
Yep.
And then you probably have, because this is a 2-loss Alabama team that beat Georgia, you have, who would the second team in the country be at that point? Probably Clemson, because
it'd be Clemson,
because they undefeated. And then at 3, you'd probably have whoever lost the Michigan-Ohio State game, even though they don't have a championship.
Right, you could. That's another thing. You could throw the other Big Ten team in.
As long as the game is close, why wouldn't you?
Right, because now the committee not only has to worry about, okay, do I put in Georgia, who lost a two-loss Alabama team, but now they have to think, okay, well, we also, if we're not putting Tennessee in, can we put in Michigan or Ohio State, whoever lost that game? Because they didn't have that either, and that's the same place that Tennessee's in.
And then you have to sweat between a Pac-12 champion and undefeated TCU and the SEC non-champion who's got 1 loss. I would love to see this.
Dude,
that would
this
be nuts.
Would be a great scenario. This would be the best scenario. I'm trying to think which would. I don't even know if there's been one quite this hard. If that stuff all plays out perfectly like that.
If all of that stuff plays out, there's never been a decision that hard.
Because I'm trying to think. The first year it was Ohio State, Oregon, Alabama, and TCU. It was TCU.
Was it? No way.
I'm pretty sure.
No, hold on.
Yeah, 2015. It was. I'm pretty sure it was TCU that year. TCU had been good for a few years there, a good stretch there. TCU actually has a pretty good history of being a good football school.
Let me look at the college football playoff 1, 2, 3, 4 for the last.
I'm pretty sure that's right.
So hold on, let me see.
I know TCU's been in it.
It was Alabama, Oregon, Florida State, and Ohio State.
Oh, I forgot about Jameis and
LOL, right. I forgot the year that Michigan State went to the college football playoff and got annihilated by Alabama.
Yeah. Wait, has TCU made it? Because I could have sworn they did.
Let me see. I don't think so. Notre Dame has. LSU the year that Joe Burrow was there. No, I don't see them anywhere. Like, I just don't. I don't see them anywhere in here.
Oh, okay. So they must have. I think they were the team. I think they might have been the 15 that year. I think that's what it.
Oh, they were number 6 in 2014, 2015.
Oh, okay, so that's what it was.
Yes.
That they were right there. I remember they were undefeated, right? Were they undefeated that year?
11-1, but they were very close to making the college football playoff.
So I think that's what it was. I remember they were right there on the cusp, and people were talking about could they get in or not, and Ohio State got in. Okay, that's the 4th.
And at the end of the day, mentioning TCU, they have to go undefeated to make the college football playoff.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's that, especially without a championship game.
All right. And so to end this off, give me what your top 4, like what college football playoff, who are the teams that are making it for you right now? Who are they?
Oof. All right, I'm going to give you 2 things.
And you can make predictions. You don't have to give me like what it is right now or who are your top teams. Give me what you want and give me predictions.
Okay, so I honestly think Georgia's going to win next week, so I think Georgia's going to make it to the SEC undefeated, which means they're going to get in no matter what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Ohio State's probably going to pull out. They lost to Michigan last year. I don't think they repeat this year. They typically, if those 2 teams lose one year, they usually win the next. But we'll see. This is a very good Michigan team. Jim Harbaugh seems like he's figured it out.
Yeah.
There at Michigan, so I could be wrong, but I'm going to go with Ohio State. Because I agree with you. I think they're the more complete team overall, and I like Ryan Day. So I'm going to go with Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, and then I do think there's a good chance Alabama could stumble and get 2 losses, and then they can't get in. So I'm going to go with probably an Oregon or USC team, whoever wins the Pac-12, because I don't see the committee giving TCU, even if they're undefeated. I really think they're just going to leave them on the outside, like at 5.
Yeah.
If this all happens. So I think it's going to be Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, and Oregon.
Okay.
And then what I want is Tennessee. So I want Tennessee to win out.
Yep.
They'll number 1. I want I really don't care between Michigan and Ohio State because I kind of like Ohio State as it goes, but I'm fine with Michigan being in there. So either one of those teams. But let's say Tennessee, Michigan, Clemson's probably getting in because they're just not going to lose. And since they're at 4 now, if they don't lose, the committee can't not put them there. So it's probably going to be Clemson in. I think they're really the only lock at this point, to be honest, because of their schedule. I just think they're the only lock. So I think. Oh, actually, no. Sorry, they're at 5. So there's a chance they don't make it. So they're at 4.
There would have to be a lot of things to move around for that. I think there's a lot of things to move around where they have to make it, but I understand why you would put them in.
See, well, the thing is, because I know Tennessee or one of Tennessee or Georgia is going to lose, and one of Ohio State and Michigan will lose. So because of that, one of those teams is going to be below them as long as Clemson doesn't lose. So I think they still get in no matter what. So I think they're the closest one to a lock, just because the other teams have to face better teams going. But, so yeah, I want Tennessee, Michigan. I think Clemson gets in, and then I really want TCU. Like TCU hasn't been in, and I want to see them get in. Like it's great to see Oregon or USC. So really, I think TCU needs Alabama to lose. They need Oregon to lose, and then they need just the rest of it to play out kind of how it's going to happen either way. So it'd be big for them if they could have Clemson and Alabama both lose ahead of them. That'd be huge for them.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens. Yeah. But yeah, that's who I want. I want TCU, Michigan, Tennessee, and I guess Clemson.
Okay.
Yeah.
The way I see it shaping out, I'm going to do the same thing. The way I see it shaping out, probably Georgia. I'm going to say Ohio State over Michigan. I'm just going to go on what I've seen from previous years that Ohio State somehow beats Michigan as 1-2. Let's see. I think if Clemson wins out, you have to put them in number 3 in that scenario. And then a 1-loss Tennessee team probably gets into that 4, even if TCU goes undefeated. As long as they keep the game close against Georgia, which I think they will. That wouldn't surprise me. And then what I would love to see is Tennessee win out, get the number 1 spot. I would love to see Michigan at number 2. Again, I just don't like. If let's say Clemson loses and somehow you get TCU undefeated at number 3, and then I would love to see one of those Oregon, USC, Pac-12 teams. I'm so sick of the Classic 4 teams making it every year. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like I'm so sick of the Classic 4, and you know who I'm talking about. And in the scenario that somehow Clemson loses and loses it all, and we're talking about Tennessee team who beats Alabama in a conference title game, Georgia gets knocked off, and they get blown out by Tennessee. Like in that weird world that happens. It won't happen, but the weird world where it does. I would love to see Tennessee, Michigan, TCU, and a mix of Oregon, USC. I would probably prefer USC because I think Lincoln Riley's a better coach. And I think the storyline would be great. But at the end of the day, that's really it. Either way, probably the most interesting college football year in a long time. I'm loving it. The parody is just amazing. Yeah. And for all you out there who watch this, go like our socials, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're really active on Twitter and Instagram. High School Backups. You got High School Backups Hockey and High School Backups Soccer on Twitter. And make sure to click that like button and subscribe. Leave us your comments. Let us know what you thought. Peace.